Aloha and welcome to another virtual Art by Sheet paint party. Today we're going to be painting the debut of Path to Paradise.
Whoa!
I'm here at a top secret Maui location to gather some inspiration. So let's get those painting stations ready, grab your favorite drink, put on some good music. We're going to go ahead and get the party started. Art by Sheet. Today, Eva, my favorite beach buddy, is going to introduce which paint party supplies you will need before you start to paint. To paint Path to Paradise, you will need the following supplies: canvas or canvas board, practice paper, a stable cup like a mason jar for water, a paper plate or paint palette, a big stack of napkins or paper towels, a large and a medium flat brush, a medium-sized round brush, and acrylic paint in the following colors: white, phthalo or dark green, cobalt or light blue, deep yellow, dark brown or umber, and oxide green or light green. Part of the joy of painting is to create a mess, so you may want an apron, drop cloth, and an easel so paint doesn't become a permanent part of your decor. While I may move a little fast in this video, please pause and paint at your own pace. Painting should be a fun and relaxing experience. Now that our painting station is all set up, let's create a masterpiece. Grab your large size flat brush, dip it in your cup of water if you have not done so already. You're going to take that paper towel, kind of pinch and squeeze your brush through the paper towel so it looks nice and flat. We are going to be starting by mixing our sand color. So let's grab about 3 scoops of white. Now when I say scoop, you want to use your brush kind of like a shovel. Grab it from the side like so. That's about a scoop. Make sure you have plenty of white on hand. We're going to be using a lot of it throughout this painting. So 1, 2, 3 big scoops of white. You can see about the size pile of paint I have. I'm painting on a 16 by 20 canvas today, so maybe take smaller scoops if your canvas is smaller. 3 scoops of white, 1 scoop of yellow, and a small scoop of brown. So 3 white, 1 yellow, a small scoop of brown. And then to mix our paint, and you don't want to overly mix it, so take that brush and kind of move along the outside edges and just tickle the top of your paint until you get a nice sand color. The medium brown color. If it looks too dark, add a big scoop of white. If it's not dark enough for you, take a little bit of brown in there. You could add little tiny bits of yellow at a time if you want it more golden. We have lots of different types of beach sand here on Maui in the Hawaiian Islands, so it could really be whatever color you want. Now I'm under mixing it. It looks kind of swirly because that'll kind of make our color not look so flat when we're blending. We'll get some nice streaks of yellow and white in there naturally. So let's rinse out our brush. Always rinse out your brush before you start painting. Pinch from the middle edge of the brush. Squeeze that brush on through. And let's make some dots, and we're going to connect the dots. Okay, so we want our beach coming up about, in Maui we like to measure with shakas. So you can put your shaka up, right? And go up about a shaka. Another way of saying that is from your bottom left corner. You can go up about 5 to 6 inches and place a dot. Let's take our brush, hold it up, place a dot even on the opposite side. So we got a dot here and a dot there. Now we can connect. Let's just add a little bit of squiggle in there. Not too dramatic for this one. You're not going to really see this line, so it's okay if you don't like what you did. You want to adjust it like so and just kind of play with it. We're going to fix it when we add in our water and our foam. All right, now keeping your brush damp, let's get paint on both sides of your brush. That would be your sand color that you just mixed. And we're going to use long brush strokes back and forth. If that paint isn't just easily gliding across your canvas, your brush is too dry, so it should be really easy. Make sure that your brush strokes are gentle, that you're pressing lightly. It's nice and damp, and you have a generous amount of paint. So happens to the best of us. Sometimes you are painting and you run out of paint, you didn't mix enough. It's really hard to mix the same color twice. So if you run out of this sand color, I'd recommend mixing a new pile, and before you start painting, put a dot on the side of your canvas, and that way you'll be able to see if it matches. And you can adjust. So you also want to blend a little bit of your new color everywhere if you mix a new color. So make sure you put some of that color everywhere. We're going to get our edges here. Long brush strokes back and forth. I'm going for a nice smooth painted surface. Also, if you like, as you go, you can paint the sides of your canvas. You can also flip your canvas upside down. You can get that bottom edge. I just won't do that today. I like having the edges painted. That way you don't have to buy a frame. All right, so let's rinse out our big brush. Wipe out that excess water. But we don't have to, it's okay if there's still a little bit of brown paint in there. Don't worry about it, because we're going to dip into our dark brown color on its own. And let's take this color and just wiggle a little bit at the top of our sandbank. Even though this looks a little bit weird right now, when we go to add in our water, it's going to look like we have wet sand at our shore. Perfect. So I'm blending over the top a couple of times. My brush is nice and damp. Don't blend it in too much though, as you want to see it. And just know it's going to look a little funky for a little bit. Okay, so I streak in that color. I blend over the top just a couple of times. Perfect. We have sand. That's it for the sand. Can you believe that? We're going to let our sand dry for a little bit. We're going to do some skipping around. We are going to move to our sky now. So once again, let's grab 3 scoops of white. 1, 2, 3. I kind of have a pile here. I'm just going to use that. And we want to keep the sky really light to start. So dip into just like a little dip of blue. You don't need a whole lot on your brush. And go ahead and mix that in to your white. So dip of blue to 3 scoops of white. Once again, I am under mixing. I want to see some blue and white streaks in there. And just to be safe, always, always, always rinse out your brush into your cup of water. Wipe out that extra water before you get started. Okay, let's dip into this color, our sky color. I like to do a little bit more sky than ocean, because if you decide to add in the palm trees, they will show up better in the sky area. But know you could adjust a little bit. So I'm going to go up for my sand on this canvas about like 4 inches. Same thing as before. Hold up your brush, try to get an idea of what a straight line looks like, and place a dot. And let's connect with a long brush stroke. So this will become our horizon. So we do want it looking pretty straight, but don't worry so much about that yet, because we'll adjust it when we add in our water later on. Alright, so dipping both sides of our brush into our sky color, just like you did before. Use long brush strokes back and forth, back and forth. And you're going to fill in the whole sky. Now, if you're painting on the edges, a personal preference I have is to actually start with the edges and paint a little bit into my canvas. Like so. Painting along those edges, giving my painting a nice frame. And now I'm just going to fill it in. That way we make sure to get all those edges painted, because 9 times out of 10, if you start painting the edges, you'll get so absorbed with the front of the canvas that you'll kind of forget about one edge. You'll notice at the end your color might be dried up at that time. So we're still working from the bottom and we're painting up. We want to make the top portion of our canvas the last area we paint, because we want that paint to blend in with our next color a little bit. All right, so if your brush is dry, you want to get it a little bit damp. Let's dip into blue. And we're going to blend a little bit of blue into like the top inch or two of our canvas. So same thing as doing the brown with the sand. We'll get a little bit of blue on our brush, and then we'll blend it on down. You know, if you want to darken your sky a little bit more, you could take streaks lower down like this by throwing just some random chunks in there, different lengths, and then just paint over the top a couple of times. You could do the same thing with white if you wanted to create the appearance of some nice white streaky clouds. Blend over them a couple of times. But I will show you guys how to do actual fluffy clouds here in just a little bit. But we want this background to dry. So we're going to skip around again. So let's rinse out our big brush one more time. Wipe it through our paper towel, and we're going to be mixing our beautiful ocean color. So by now you probably need more white. It might be a little muddy. I am painting with Dick Blick acrylic paints today. They didn't paint you to say that or anything. I think it's a very affordable, nice paint. Okay, so for our ocean, let's grab 2 scoops of white again. And then we're going to dip into just a little corner of our dark green, tiny corner of dark green. And an even tinier dip of white. I mean, just a little bit. We want to keep this water pretty white, pretty light. So you should get a nice kind of teal color. You could add little bits of green and blue at a time in there. It could be a little darker if you want. We all have different shades of teal that appeal to us differently. So you mix what appeals to you. Okay, we'll rinse out our brush. Let's dip into our teal mix. And pretty much, you're going to outline your sand. This would be a good time if you don't like the way you painted your sand bank. You could paint into it. You're going to outline your sky. It's okay if your sky is still wet. If you have a big dribble, might be hard to see. I have like a big dribble here. Use a paper towel or your finger and kind of just wipe it off. It's okay if it paints into your sky a little bit though. We don't want any blank canvas showing after this step. So let's get that outline. Don't worry if it blends in because we're going to add more color over the top. And now let's blend from the top all the way down to our sand bank. Don't forget to get the sides of your canvas if you've been doing that all along. Keep that brush nice and damp. If it's ever making a scratching sound, just get that brush damp again. Very nice. Okay. This is an extra bonus step. I like to actually dip my brush into white. I'm not going to rinse it unless it's dry. Dip your brush into white, flip it over, get like a tiny bit of yellow. Do you see how much yellow is on there? Like a tiny little bit with quite a bit of white. And let's focus on the shoreline here. We're going to kind of just streak these colors in. Oh, get a little bit more white in there. And to the bottom, like 2 inches or so, you're going to just blend it in, and it's going to just kind of give it like this sandy undertone, as this is where the water would be the shallowest. So just little bits of paint at a time until you achieve the desired amount of yellow that you want. I'll kind of add this limey tone in there. All right, that looks nice. So let's rinse out our brush. We're almost done with this large size flat brush. We're gonna dip into your blue on its own. So your blue, dip both sides of your brush into a little nib. And now this is where you wanna get your horizon the straightest. So inhale, exhale, and you're gonna paint all the way across. And don't worry if it gets messy. You have plenty of room, you can adjust it. You want to cover up all of that teal at the very top. We want it to be straight. If it's a little bit crooked though, that's perfectly fine. You're going to have your trees cutting into it. If it's really crooked, you could put your tree down lower. We're going to, also it's the ocean. So there's waves in the ocean, right? Usually there are. It's very wavy today here in Maui. Okay. So we're gonna just streak this blue into the top. Inch or two, you could go down lower. This is just to get the idea that there's some deeper water out there. Now we've got this beautiful cascade of colors. If you get too much in there and you're like, oh, I don't love it, it's just sticking there, I want it to be a little lighter, just now you could dip back into your original base color and then you can fix it. Beautiful. I love it. Let's keep going. Let's rinse out our big brush. Quite a few steps with this one before the break. All right, so we've rinsed out our big flat brush. Let's squeeze it through our paper towel. We're gonna make foam. So here's the key. If you're doing a fluffy object like foam, you want your brush to look fluffy. So you're gonna take it and flick it. And we wanna make sure that those bristles are kind of distressed. You wanna dip into white, straight up white, and then scrape that white off your brush so you have almost no paint. See, my brush is very, it's fluffy and has very little paint on it. And this is the motion we're gonna use, tapping. So let's tap. If you tap hard, your foam is gonna get very fluffy. If you tap lightly, it's gonna be kind of skinny. So let's pick a couple of areas where our sand and our shoreline, or excuse me, our shoreline and our ocean meet. And let's tap, kind of heavy in a couple spots, and then tap lightly and connect. So it could be the same thickness of foam all the way across, but more realistically, waves are going to be crashing, they're going to be pulled back. So it's better to have some thicker areas of foam and then some skinnier areas of foam where that wave would be pulling back. Your ocean's still wet. It should blend a little bit with your ocean color. Just let that happen. That's perfectly fine. You could even kind of tap or wiggle a little bit of foam onto your shore like this. If you do this without very much paint on your brush. So I literally basically tapped all the paint out of my brush. And now with almost no paint, I have some teal and white on my brush just from painting. I can kind of squiggle. It's a hard word for me to say today. Squiggle on my shoreline. And that looks kind of like some foams coming in. Maybe I'll tap a little bit of bright white paint. Beautiful. All right, we're starting to feel like we have this cove we want to just explore, stumbled upon. If you like it could be really calm like this. If you want to add a little bit more dimension, the last thing you could do with a little bit of white is to kind of scribble, like move back and forth like this. I'm keeping my brush relatively flat. And you can add some foam kind of in the lower third of your ocean. So, nice. So we got some rougher water kind of coming in where the break would be. Okay. Make sure throughout this painting and any painting that you're taking a step back. You want to check your painting from a distance. Often it'll look way different when you take a step back, and it's meant to be viewed on a wall, right? So you're not going to be really standing 3 centimeters away from your painting to look at it. It should be on a wall. So make sure you take a step back so you can get perspective. Okay, so we have that done. We are going to now paint our bridge, part of our bridge. This is going to be worked in a couple of parts. So if your paint is kind of mixed with all those watercolors, your blue and your teal, let's pump a little bit more white paint, or grab a little bit more white paint. I'm going to rinse out my medium-sized flat brush, this guy right here. I'm going to dip into white. And let's start with a dot in the bottom middle of our canvas. I have a dot. And then I'm going to move up from this dot about like 3 inches and place a second dot. For now, we can just connect. Mine's showing up a little crooked, and that's okay. You're actually not going to see this line. This is just to get an idea of where to go. So let's start a little bit smaller with the width of our bridge because it's going to grow a little bit because it's not going to be perfect the first time we paint it, and we're going to have to adjust. So let's make a capital T. I'm going to go out about 2 inches out each side of this middle line here. So I've got just a big letter T. I might make it a little bigger. Okay. Now we're going to connect down to the bottom of the canvas, but instead of doing a straight line, let's start on the left side here. I'm going to stamp and just slightly bow out like I'm making a parenthesis shape. Even less than that maybe, but see, I can adjust. I'm going to do the same thing on the right side. It's going to curve the same direction, shoot down to the bottom of the canvas. And let's just fill it all in. Use a decent amount of white paint. This is going to look really weird at this point. You're probably going to be like, oh, what did she just make me do? I think I ruined it. How could you? Why, oh, why? Don't worry, you didn't ruin it. I'm going to kind of smooth it out a little bit. I mean, really, you can see it's not bending that much, but that little bit of curve will kind of make it look like, well, it's a bridge or a little path leading out to this beach. Wonderful. Okay. Again, just let that dry for now. I know that part's a little scary, but it'll look awesome. I'm going to rinse out my square brush. We're going to just step away from the bridge for a minute, and we're going to add in clouds. Now, feel free to fast forward through this part because not everybody likes to paint clouds. I personally love them. I would like you to at least try them because they're pressure free. You can paint a cloud, and if it doesn't look good, you can kind of blend it back into your background, just like you did up here with the sky. So pressure free. Let's dip into white with our square brush and kind of tap it out a couple of times. We want our brush to be very damp. We do not want very much paint on it. And all I'm going to do is take my brush and kind of make some circular shapes. I'm going to kind of nestle all these shapes along my ocean line. So to start, I'm going to actually take that white paint. Now every time you dip into it, you're going to dip into it and scrape it off your brush. You're going to want to do that often because you're not going to have much paint on there. But trust me, you want light paint, but you want that paint to still easily saturate the canvas. So I've got a little bit of white here at the top of my water. Maybe that's kind of like fog or whatever, or Vogue if you're in Hawaii. And then I'm going to take my brush, we're going to do that spinny action, and we're going to add some fluffy clouds. So I'm really just focusing on the top of the cloud. So let's just make some like loop-de-loop shapes. And notice each shape is at a different height. So that's the key to making this look awesome. You just kind of bounce around randomly. Maybe I could do another one that's a little taller. It kind of stops when it hits here. Again, most of these circular shapes are kind of all different sizes. And then once I have the line in, I'm just going to kind of paint with a kind of parentheses shaped brush stroke again. And I'm just going to fill it in. Remember, we want this to be very light. These are clouds. Even if they look a little funky or unrealistic, you're going to have so much palm tree in front of it, you're really not going to see that much of this step. So just have fun with it. But of course, if you do hate it, you can always just paint your sky color over the top. So my brush is getting a little dry, so I'm going to rinse it out. I'm going to show you something. If your paint isn't just saturating the canvas right, or it's oversaturated, you can just paint with water once there's a little bit of paint on that canvas. And as long as you move fast, you can kind of spread it out, and now it looks a little bit more see-through like a cloud. All right, dipping into white again. Maybe now I'll work over here. Streak, fill it in. I don't really like the way I streaked my paint right here, so I could fill it in. If you have clouds cross over each other, whatever cloud you want in front, you could kind of go heavier with the paint so it shows up. Fill it in, fill it in. Okay. Isn't that beautiful? Beautiful, beautiful. If you like, you could add some additional clouds, but it's easy to overdo it. You could add a couple like just above these by doing your squiggly again, and then on the underside just kind of wiggling a line and filling it in. If you wanted some faint clouds higher up, you could bring clouds all the way to the top, although I think keeping them kind of on the horizon makes this painting look a little bit less two-dimensional. Add some scribbles in between. All right, I'm not going to overdo it. Okay, maybe I'll overdo it a little bit. But part of painting is knowing when to stop. I think this is the time. Okay, one more. I'm misbehaving because no one can tell me not to. All right, perfect. Okay, so wonderful. We have that background. Almost done. We're going to get back to this weird thing. It looks like a tongue in the middle of our painting or something like that. Let's get back to it. So maybe check it. Make sure you like how it's looking. It's okay if it's kind of blotchy right now because you're actually not going to see the white here in a minute. So I'm going to take my square brush. That's the smaller flat brush. We'll be calling it the square brush, I guess, today. And I'm going to dip into brown. So I have squeezed my brush so it's nice and flat. I'm going to dip into brown. And I'm going to create probably 3 to 4 horizontal streaks across. So it's okay if it's not perfect the first time, but inhale, and on the exhale, paint. And stop when you hit the edge. Let's continue. Let's try to make them about the same length across. Stamp and pull. Looks like I'm going to get 4 in there. Also kind of depends on how big your shape is. Things like that. If it's a little crooked, that's perfectly fine. You're not going to really tell in a minute. Now, if your brush has gotten fluffy, rinse it out. Otherwise, let's go ahead and outline it. too fast with this part. Take your time. And exhale. If you have shaky hands, which I do a lot, probably all the coffee, what you want to do is make sure your background's dry. You can use your pinky finger as an anchor and kind of anchor one side and then paint like this, and it'll help make your hand a little bit more stable. I know it's probably a little different for the lefties out there. Please, lefties, I would love to hear you in the comments. Tell me some of your painting tricks, as I know it's a little bit more of a struggle to not smear your art. Although, look at this. I'm a mess, so I create smears often. I like being messy with paint, though. Okay, so we have this outlined. Let's take our square brush, our medium-sized flat brush, whatever you want to call it. Take your finger, flick it. Ah, it's nice and pokey. We're going to dip into brown and scrape it off your brush. So dip into brown, spiky square brush, scrape it out of your brush. And because our brush is kind of fluffy, we're going to get some nice streaks. So I'm going to press very lightly, and on the inside of each of these white boxes, I'm going to throw some streaks. And I might add a little bit more paint on the left edge of each box here. I want that to be a little darker because that's going to be showing more. So streak, streak, streak. Maybe add a little bit more to the left. If you kind of lose your lines at this point, don't worry about it. We'll fix it in just a moment. Same thing here. Streak, streak, streak. Streak, streak, streak. Same thing here. However many boxes you have. Go ahead and streak in them with your paint. Okay, if you've lost those lines, that's perfectly fine. Just rinse out your medium-sized flat brush, backslash square brush, squeeze it through your paper towel. Let's dip into brown and let's just kind of outline and bring it back a little bit. We want there to be a little bit of separation. You could use a hint of black in your brown if you would like. I am not going to do that in this. I think that this is kind of nice to not have black in this painting. But you could add just, a little bit of black will go a long ways. You could add just a hint of black if you have some, if you want it to stand out more. And I say a little bit, I mean a little bit. A common mistake people make when they make a color too dark or too light is they keep, especially if it involves white or black paint, if you're trying to like mix a color and you end up with this big pile and it's too dark, you're gonna have to add like 5 times as much paint to that pile to get it to the lighter color you want. So what you wanna do if you make a black tint color and you make it too dark is just to take whatever color you're using, let's say brown, grab a new scoop in a new space and grab a little tiny corner of that darker mix that you made and mix it with the new color. Rather than just trying to add brown to get it to be the color you want. It just will take so much more paint. You want to conserve that paint because it's expensive. Okay. Might play with this a little bit more. Don't worry too much about the details of this too. We're going to add grass and things that can kind of cover up part of this. This part should feel kind of weird, which it does. I always get to this part and I think I messed up. Okay, now I'm going to rinse out my brush. We'll do one more tiny detail. You're going to take the stick end of your brush, dip into brown. This is so optional, but you can add little hints of nails in the wood. So I'm just going to tap lightly using brown and the stick end of my brush. Tap, tap, tap. I'm going to tap 2 dots into each side. Perfect. Now I have some nails, and some of those will get covered up as well. How are we doing? We have been working so hard on our background, and I think we have earned a break. So while you could technically paint this painting all the way through without a break, let's take a little break so we can stretch out our legs, shake out our hands, and in the meantime, go ahead and enjoy this short video clip. Welcome back, everybody. Now that we've enjoyed a short break, let's go ahead and finish our path to paradise. We're going to start with our medium-sized flat brush. Rinse it out, squeeze it through your paper towel. We're going to paint grass. So throughout this part, make sure your brush stays nice and sharp. And you want to use very, very, very light brush strokes. So I'm going to do a cheat technique to start. These won't be the only colors in here though. We're going to be using your light green on one side and yellow on the other side. So light green and yellow. This is called double loading. As you have to reload with these colors, it's not very specific what side it goes on, as long as you have both of those colors. We're going to basically focus on the top of the grass. So let's start at the left side of our bridge. And what you're going to do is stamp down very lightly and then kind of wiggle and release your pressure. So by the time you're at the top of your grass, you're like barely touching the canvas. And we don't want this to be even. We want our grass to come into the water at some points and to be lower in other points. So let's just kind of focus some wispy streaks of grass. If your one color is taking over too much, you can dip into just like green on its own or yellow. So we kind of have a nice blend of colors, but again, this won't be the final time we do colors in our grass. We'll be adding more. All right, tickle, 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 tickle it in. Perfect. I'm gonna also get a tiny bit of dark green on my brush now. So I have yellow. I have quite a bit of yellow, light green, and just a corner dark green. And now I'm going to work and kind of add in some grass a little lower down to fill in these shapes. Okay, let's continue on the right side. Same thing. Doesn't have to match anything on the left. Be dipping into yellow and light green as needed. And let's press down lightly and then release, kind of like you're flicking. It can wiggle any sort of which way. If you get one piece of grass like I just did and it's like kind of fat, you can kind of make it longer like this. Because it doesn't have to go any sort of way. It's just blowing in the wind. Now let's dip into the same colors, our light green and our yellow. Let's grab a little bit of dark green too. Just like we did before. We're going to start working on the spaces in between, and we're going to add kind of a second layer that's lower. Perfect. You can check, you can always adjust later. Okay. Now let's keep working down till we get to the bottom of our canvas with the 3 colors on our brush. And just, we don't want anything getting muddy. So what you don't want to do is keep working on one area again and again and again and again. You just want to keep getting that paint in there and moving on down. Pretend like you're painting in little bits of hair or something. You're just kind of combing all these individual strands in of grass. And you're going to stop when you hit the edge. You could probably stop bringing this grass down maybe the bottom couple of inches. If one area ends up getting taken over by one color, you can use yellow or dark green to kind of add some separation. And it's okay too if you see any canvas showing, or that sand color rather, if you see it showing between the blades of grass. Although as you get to the bottom inch or two, you really want this pretty solid. So just keep dipping in those colors. If your brush gets dry, you probably want to rinse it out. When you get about this far away from the bottom, which is maybe like a ½ inch or so, you can just stop. You know, if you're an overachiever, you could always bring this grass to the side too of your canvas. Okay, let's repeat on the right side. Stamp and flick and stamp and flick. It's like a dance move with your paintbrush. The paintbrush is doing the stamp and flick. And the more you practice, the more you'll get used to pressure. You know, when you're first starting out, I mean, not even then, just if you're a energetic person like myself, you'll find that you kind of hold your breath a lot when you're painting, and that you're almost like grinding your hand into the canvas. Really just play with different sorts of pressures as you're going along. This is a good space to, good time to do it. Play with harder pressure, with lighter pressure. Kind of see where you need to be. I bet you're probably pressing down too hard. Press lightly. And again, if you get a piece of grass like this and it's got a flat top and you want it to kind of taper off like the other blades of grass, it can go longer. We can have some long blades of grass. We're going to add some kind of flowery like things over the top of this as well. In a bit. Flick, 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 flick. Beautiful. I have this spot here. It's kind of just mild green, so maybe I'll throw some more yellow in there to kind of brighten it up. I'm going to focus some paint on these in-between areas that are at least halfway down my grass. We're going to keep filling it in, filling it in. Both of your greens and yellow on your brush. Perfect. Let's rinse out our brush because it's probably getting a little dry. Now for the very bottom, which is going to kind of look like it's going under the bridge, we're going to use these same colors for now. Yellow, green, and a little bit of dark green. So quite a bit of light green and yellow, tiny bit of dark green. And you're going to just tap in the bottom. Woo! Just threw my canvas there. I have lightning reflexes. Okay, tap, 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 tap. Tap, tap, tap. Don't get so aggressive that you tap a hole through your canvas. You could even do some more flicks. They'll kind of make it look like you have some grass down low. I'll tap a little bit of dark green in here. Let's get a little bit more of that rich dark green color. Flick, flick, flick. Make sure it's filled all the way to the bottom. If you go over your bridge a little bit, that's perfectly fine. Let's repeat on the right side. Tap, tap, tap. And you'll notice I'm kind of going up and down with my brush. The very top of this line is kind of rough. It's not just like a straight line all the way across. Just tap, tap, tap. Flick, flick, flick. Flick, 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 flick. Flick, flick, flick. Tap, tap, tap. Tap and flick. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Ah, it's starting to come together, isn't it? Okay. We want to let this dry. We have to finish our bridge. We're going to add in some little flowers here, but there's a lot of paint going on right here. So we're going to go ahead and let it dry just a little bit, and then we'll fix it. We got to add in these nice banisters because right now the bridge just kind of looks like crooked, doesn't quite look right. But once we add in kind of these side posts, it'll look a lot better. Okay, so we're gonna move to our round brush. So let's grab our round brush and spin it through a paper towel. And we are gonna grab two colors at the same time again. Let's grab white on one side of our brush and brown on the other. Okay, so we got white and brown on there. So these trees, you could do 2 or 3. They're really great. If there's something you don't like in your background, you might want to like cover it up. You'll be able to put a tree there. You can kind of make a claw with your hand and hold it up, and you'll get an idea like, okay, tree would look good there, maybe there. You could do 2 or 3. Just make sure each tree is at a different level. If you have 2 trees that are level with each other, it just won't look as like inviting, like you're walking through this tunnel or something going to the beach. It'll just look more flat. So my brush is not fluffy, it's nice and pointed. I have brown and white on there. I'm gonna make a claw with my hand to get an idea of where I want my first tree. And I'm gonna do a dot that'll be right here, the center. Then you can use your brush and kind of get an idea of where you want it to connect. For me, I'm going like 4 inches up from the bottom left corner. That's not really that specific. It could be going off anywhere off the side of your canvas. And I'm gonna make these trees kind of squirrely. So what I mean is I'm gonna start with really light pressure. I'm gonna add a little bit of wiggle. And as I make my way down to this bottom dot, I'm gonna press a little harder to connect. You can dip into more white and brown as needed and kind of fatten it up a little bit. I have a lot of white taking over right now. That's what's going to make your tree not look very see-through. So it's okay because we're going to add some tree rings to it in just a little bit. And don't be afraid to go in and add some like lumps, you know, some like nice knots in your tree or happy bumps. Okay, and we're going to repeat the same thing on the right side. So again, this tree, you want to be a little lower, but once again, it's going to look a lot better if it's over your ocean. So I might pin it right here, bring it down to here. So it ends at a different level than this tree. It begins at a different level than this tree. And if you do 3 trees or more, you know, you can go ahead and do that. Just use that same rule. All right, let's squiggle some more. I'm starting very lightly. I'm pressing harder as I reach this dot. Then you can fill it in, add some bumps, add some lumps, whatever you gotta do. Perfect. Beautiful. Let's let that dry a little bit. All right, so while we're letting that dry, I'm gonna grab my demo paper here. I'm gonna talk about the tops of the trees. So we're gonna start with light green on our round brush. I've rinsed it and spun it through a paper towel in yellow, but we'll be adding a couple more colors in there. Let's pretend like this is the trunk. Let's just pretend like that's brown. To do the top of the tree, you want to start with a dot at the very top. And this dot is important because we want to pull all of our branches from this dot. So you're going to stamp, and you're going to stamp and flick just like you did with your grass. So you're probably really good at this already. Stamp on that dot and flick. Keep stamping on that dot. Stamp and flick. Oops. Stamp and flick, stamp and flick. And keep going on that dot. You can add as many brush strokes as you like, as long as you always start from that dot, because if you get away with it from it, your lines are going to keep building upwards like this. It's going to kind of look more like a pineapple. So pull from your dot, stamp, flick, so on and so forth. You're going to get a lovely top of your tree. If you're doing more than one object that are the same all the time, like this time we're doing 2 trees, you'll have your favorite one and your least favorite, but that's okay. It's okay to have a least favorite. It's part of the process. Just be nice to yourself. Don't be too picky. I have lines that I don't like in these trees. It's okay. Imperfections are what make acrylic paintings even more beautiful because it's done by you. Okay, so I've got light green and yellow on my brush. It's okay if these trees overlap. Mine probably aren't going to today. If you get some overlap in your painting, think about which tree you want to paint first, as the second tree you paint will be the one in front. So I'm going to start with the left, but you can start with either. Dot at the top, light green and yellow, stamp and flick. Stamping from that dot, I'm going to add 2 lower branches. Trying to keep all these branches roughly the same size. Stamp and flick, stamp and flick. Stamp and flick a couple tall ones. Now we can continue to do so in between. Awesome. It shouldn't look finished yet. You could take a peek back though. You know, if one branch gets a little long, make all of them a little long. It can have a big, beautiful, fluffy top and a couple poking out the top there. Why not? Let's add some more color. If you love it the way it is right now, it could just be those 2 colors. But some other colors I like to add are dark green. If your brush is getting fluffy or dry, rinse it. Otherwise, you can just kind of go for it. So if you're streaking more colors in, they don't have to be as thick as your original colors. So maybe I'll throw some chunks of light green in there, or excuse me, dark green. You could do the same with brown. Streak, streak, just kind of random. I'm still pulling from that dot so my design doesn't get too high. Oopsies. As I mentioned, I'm a mess. I'm a messy painter. I know you guys can't see the floor, but there's towels all over the floor because I'm painting on carpet, which I do not recommend. But if you have a mess happen like this, if you work really fast, you have a wet paper towel, you can just rub it off and it'll disappear. So acrylic paint is nice like that. As long as you move fast, if you have like a big dot or oopsies or smudge from your finger and it's not dry, you can just rinse it off really fast. Or wipe it off, rather. Okay, so round brush, let's rinse it between trees. Let's do our tree on the right. Light green and yellow. Dot at the top. Stamp and flick, stamp and flick. Stamp and flick. Could be smaller or taller. Let the painting speak to you. Don't try to overthink it. You're going to do so much better if you try not to think at all. It's overthinking that really destroys the creative process. Know that life is imperfect and your art is going to be imperfect. And it's that moments of imperfection that really, you know, that's why we're human. Nobody likes perfection. It's what keeps us driven. It's what keeps us learning to not be perfect. So let those little imperfections happen. And most of all, be kind to yourself. And just know that every time you make a mistake, you've learned something, and that's more valuable. Knowledge is more valuable than a perfect piece of art. Okay. So I'm going to rinse out my round brush. I'm getting a little dry. We're going to continue with your dark green. If you like, I would do whatever you did with your left tree with this tree. I guess something I probably should have mentioned earlier, if your sky is a little darker, maybe use heavier yellows. If your sky color or if your trees are over your ocean, if anything's a little darker, add heavier yellows. If anything's really light, maybe add heavier greens. You want some contrasting colors here so that these trees stick out from the background. So I'm going to do brown. So you can overdo this too. If you start to do too many colors and you start to get like this muddy blob of a tree, what I want you to do is not panic. Let it dry. Just be patient. Let it dry. You could come in and streak white in your trees too and break up any blobbiness, or even sky color, and it'll probably look fine. So depending on the painting, I've done tons of colors in palm trees. They don't even have to be realistic colors. But the best thing you can do, like this one I can tell is getting already a little blobby. If I kept painting it, it might just be like this big circle instead of like having these nice streaks. So Just let it dry, and then you can fix it by adding a lighter color in the top, like white or yellow, or a blend of white or yellow. Let's add tree rings. I'm going to show you guys 2 ways you can do this, depending on your experience level of painting. I think no matter what your experience level is, you could do this step. But step 1, I'm not going to paint this way, we'll explain. If you want to add a shadow on your tree to make them look a little less two-dimensional, you could take that square brush in brown and outline the inside of each tree. On the side, that'll add a little shadow. I want to show you guys this though, because I think it's really fun. I've rinsed out my medium-sized flat brush and my square brush. I'm going to take my finger and flick it like so. So my bristles are spiky. So you can see the light shining through. I'm going to dip into brown and scrape both sides of my brush out, so I have very little paint. And depending on what brush stroke or what hand you are, you could start from the left and pull to the right, start from the right and pull to the left. I do this in my second video, but I'm going to add tree rings. So I'm going to stamp and pull little smiley faces. I'm going to try to not go outside of my branch line here, or my trunk. But if you do a little bit, you know, most palm trees kind of have some like ruffly foliage off the sides. So it's okay if you go a little bit outside the lines. But you want these lines to be overlapping. You don't want, like, you know, stripes in there. Overlap, overlap. If you have branches crossing in front, you probably want to skip over that area, or just paint all the way down and then come back in, and any cross branches that cross in front, you can paint them in again. And that looks really cool. It just adds a little bit of texture in there. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull from the shadowy side to the right. I typically pull left to right. I don't know why. It's just easier for me, but whatever you do naturally is the right way to do it for you. So don't overthink it. We're all going to have our own different ways of painting and approaching this, which is why it makes it so much fun. I could paint this painting 10,000 times and it would look different every time, which is why I love art parties. Okay, great. We're really coming along here. We've got our trees and our grass in, but something just still doesn't look right. The bridge. So we'll add flowers and stuff too, but this bridge, we're gonna work on it right now. So take your medium-sized flat brush, rinse it, and squeeze it through your paper towel. We're gonna add our posts. So let's start with like the general area of where they're gonna go, and then we're gonna fatten them all up. So let's start. We're gonna put a post here and a post here. Depending on the size of your bridge, you might want to make them smaller or bigger. It's better to start smaller because you're gonna adjust the shape and they're gonna get bigger. So this is just straight up white. I'm gonna stamp and pull up like an inch or two from the top left. And right here, I'm gonna do the same thing. Stamp and pull up. That's it for now. You can hold up your brush. You want those to be kind of even. Yes? They're mostly even. Okay. So let's do the same thing. It's gonna get a little trickier here, but from the left edge, stamp and pull straight up. So no matter where we're moving in space, if you look, these pulls all stay straight. They're not curving this way or this way. You could move anywhere along in space in this canvas, but your object would always be upright. We're kind of playing with perspective here. That's what you want for these posts. So same thing here, bottom right corner, right here. We want it to be about the same height. So if you like, you could line up your brush and do a little dot to make sure it's even with your other ones. Stamp and pull up. Simple enough, right? All right, so we saved the trickiest part for last. Let's find the middle in between our bridge. Let's do a dot. Even. That's pretty close to the middle of these two posts. Now remember what I said, we don't want it curving this way or this way. You're gonna stamp and pull straight up, and it's probably on the right side gonna cross into your bridge, and this one it's gonna come a little bit to the outside. Great, I know you guys did a great job with that. If they're a little bit crooked at this point, don't worry that much about it. We still have time to fix it. So we want to fatten each post so they're about like a ½ inch wide. So I'm going to kind of stamp my brush and pull out, and then maybe paint down. I'm trying to get some rectangles here as best as I can. It's okay if they kind of stand out right now because we're going to add brown on top here in just a minute. Okay. 2 posts. Let's do the middle. We're going to start from the top and work down. If any of your posts overlap, well, I think that's perfectly fine as long as it's the lowest post is in front. Perspectively, this would be closer to our field of view than this over here. Up a little bit so I can get the bottom. Pull at the very bottom post straight to the bottom. It's okay if the bottom post is a little bigger than the other ones too, because it's closer to our field of view. Cool. Still a little bit of crookedness, especially because I'm painting from the side, which I never recommend, but that's okay too. And we'll add some quirkiness here in a minute. I'm going to let that actually, I'm not going to let it dry. Let's move to our round brush and rinse it out and spin it through a paper towel. We want a nice sharp edge. We're going to dip into white, and we're going to connect each of these posts. Now it's going to get a little weird in some of these areas, and you'll see why in a minute. But stamp, let's start on the left edge. The left edge of each post is going to connect with the smiley face. So stamp, smiley face. Stamp, smiley face. Oops, stamp at the top, pull to the top of the other one. It's okay if it gets a little overlapped. We'll fix it later. Same thing over here. Except I'm going to stamp the left edge to the left edge, smiley face curving in the same exact direction. Stamp and connect. Stamp at the top where you just ended, connect. All right. Now it's probably a little hard to see, but we'll talk more about that later. Now let's take our brush, our round brush, rinse it out and kind of fluff it. Dip into white and yellow and kind of tap that brush out. So I've got white and yellow. My brush is kind of fluffy. And anywhere you want, you can tap in some bunches of flowers. So I'm going to just add a few clumps here in this flatter area of various shapes and sizes. Okay, same thing on the right side. Just add some hints of flowers. If you have other colors like pink or something, you would want to start with white and then add that second color or third color, however many you're adding, over the top. But start with white, because a lot of times those purple and pink tones don't show up very well. Okay, and then I'm going to use yellow and white again. And anywhere in my grass area at different heights, I'm going to tap in some oval shapes. Kind of like willows. Seems more to me like more of a Northern California beach scene or Oregon than Maui. But you know, you don't have so many willows here. But maybe you have a different idea for a flower. I'd love to see what you create. And I love seeing all of our different expressions, so please post in the comments your finished masterpieces. or tell me if there's certain flowers you'd like to see in another video. I love doing nature scenes. Okay. You can add a little bit more yellow over the top if your white's taking up too much, or any color you want. Honestly, we have so many streaks, I think you could just leave it like that, but just know if that isn't working for you, you could take both of your greens on that round brush and just from each of the bottom of your flowers add a little streak like this, whoop, 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 so it looks like they're coming from somewhere. You could even kind of throw some flicks out of those streaks with the V shape to look like, you know, it's a stem with some leaves. It's flick, flick, little V shapes. Awesome. So we got a little bit more going on in there. All right, we need to come back to our bridge. I'm going to use my square brush, rinse it out, and squeeze it through that paper towel. I'm going to dip into brown on its own, and basically we're just going to fill in each of our posts. So I think it's easier to start with the outline and then fill it in. Your white might still be a little bit wet. If it is, or if it isn't, it's still perfectly fine to paint this step. But maybe start in the area where it's drier. Or you could start top to bottom. You're just gonna have to experiment and see what works for you. It really depends on just how you approach your painting. I like to smear things, so I have to kind of work top to bottom so that I don't drag my hand here and mess everything up. This is that step again if you were using a little black mixed in with your brown, which I'm not doing today, but if you just want this bridge to be more defined, most artists never use straight black on their own. So don't just dip into black and outline anything. Unless you're going for a really graphic piece, you don't want to do that. What you'd want to do is mix brown with a tiny dip of black, and then you could outline things. So it's kind of like a dark brown rather than a straight black. It'll just look a little better. Okay, we have some posts. Again, I want to just keep using brown until I have a nice outline of each of these posts. I want it to feel like strong wood posts. Although this whole painting is a pretty like soft, you know, soft, happy day beach painting. Should feel light and fun and happy. I'm gonna take my square brush, dip it in a cup of water. The last thing we want to do for this bridge is to rinse out our round brush, dip into black or your black brown mixture, and re-outline our little smiley faces, which are like our chords kind of connecting. Oops. Make sure you have fresh brown. If you have a lot of colors in there, just get yourself some fresh brown. So again, that's always connecting the left side, the top left sides of our posts with the smiley face. And if they are, depending on the perspective of your bridge, they might get a little wonky or weird in some places, and that's okay. Sometimes it's easier too to outline things with your round brush. So if you felt like you're struggling with your square brush you have to play with flipping the two different directions. If that feels hard to you, try your round brush. Try outlining there, because that works a little bit more like a pen, so it's a little bit more intuitive for some of us. Re-outline anything you need to. Take a step back. Make sure it looks okay. Make sure you have a bridge in there. How are we doing? So, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more step. We need to sign our masterpiece. So you can sign with paint or with a Sharpie. I would pick a darker color. And the traditional place to sign is in the bottom right-hand corner of the painting. If that doesn't feel right to you, if it's just too pretty, you could sign on the back. I would just recommend signing along wherever you have a wood frame. So as you're wrapping up, stay tuned. I have a few more things to tell you. Well, beach lovers, once again, congratulations on completing your masterpiece. Thank you so much for painting with me today. If you enjoyed this art party and you're able to leave a tip to fund future virtual paint parties and tutorials, you can do so by leaving a donation on my Venmo or PayPal, which I have also included in the video's description. Also, if you live on Maui and you'd like to follow along with any of my past and future art parties, you can purchase all the supplies you need via our online store at www.islandartparty.com. A clickable link has also been provided in the video's description. And please show us your art. I'd love to see all of your finished masterpieces. You can email your completed masterpieces to info@islandartparty.com, or you can send them to me via my Facebook page, Art by Sheep. Also, I'd love to hear from you. If there's anything you'd like to see at all in any future art parties, please comment. I always respond to my comments. And also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for weekly fun and inspiring content. Thank you once again for painting with me. It is so important to take time for ourselves to enjoy creative exploration. See you next time, and aloha.